All right, in just a minute, we're going to be taking something of a deep dive into health services for transgender youth in particular in New York City. But before we do that, we thought we'd give you a little bit of a broad perspective as to what's happening across the country. So let's get into it. Healthcare for transgender youth. Our first slide coming up here. Hormone therapy by age of respondent. You can see the numbers correlate on this side, and these are some age groups at the bottom. Now, one interesting thing from this survey is people who are between the ages of 18 and 24 are least likely to receive any form of hormone therapy, but they're also the group that's in the highest category for want to do it someday. So if you look at the numbers, we're looking at about 45% there. The numbers peak between ages of 45 and 54. People who've actually had the therapy, and you can see the correlation goes down with age of the people who want it someday versus folks who've already pulled the trigger, so to say. So we're going to go to the next slide here and look at what's happening. Here we go. Boom. Look at what's happening with transgender health insurance rules across the country. This deep blue color that we're looking at for New York State represents somebody who we may argue is doing it right. It means that they have explicit policies banning any exclusion from both private insurance and Medicaid coverage for members of that state. New York has gotten the idea, PA, Illinois, and a few states out on the West Coast. You can see this map of gray here where people may be a little less enlightened and inclined to extend those services, whether they be private or Medicaid, for people who are transgender to receive unfettered health insurance. So that's the map that we're looking at nationally, but in New York, we're definitely making news on the front of healthcare for transgender youth, and we're going to get into that in the A block.
Last month, the New York State Health Department proposed a new rule extending Medicaid coverage, making all transgender care and services available to all qualified persons regardless of age. This proposal comes amid a backdrop of legal battles and increased advocacy for transgender rights.
Well, here to tell us about the legal fight for this coverage, the physical and social implications for transgender youth, and where we go from here are Mick Kinkett, an attorney with the Sylvia Rivera Law Project. Welcome to BK Live.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're also happy to welcome Dr. Jeffrey Birnbaum, the Executive Director of the HEAT Program for Health and Education Alternatives for Teens. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
And finally, Richard Weinstein is the Transgender Services Specialist at HEAT. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you all for joining us. Mick, if we could start with you, tell us about the legal fight to get this implemented.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to contradict anything that was just said, but I feel like it's important to clarify the Department of Health for New York State did not just all of a sudden decide that transgender people matter for healthcare. This is only because transgender individuals have been battling for a very, very long time to get this recognized.
All credit where credit is due.
And so it's important to note that we had Medicaid didn't mention transgender people at all until 1998 when the Pataki administration came in and made a complete ban for transgender healthcare. So this was adults, people under 18, any kind of healthcare was banned for Medicaid coverage. And it's a completely political decision. It flew in the face of all knowledge we had about the medical necessity of this. It flew in the face of what transgender people were asking for. And it was a contradiction to the health services that Medicaid was already providing on a sort of a case-by-case basis. And since 1998, transgender individuals in New York State and advocates and loved ones have been trying to get transgender health services back into Medicaid and also private insurance. However, it's been no response whatsoever. So there was a Medicaid redesign team that happened. There have been petitions to relook at this particular provision, and the Department of Health just completely did not respond to these requests and didn't respond to the comments that people submitted, people telling their personal stories. And so then in 2014, in June, the Sylvia Rivera Law Project with Wilkie Farron Gallagher and the Legal Aid Society filed a lawsuit called Cruz v. At the time it was Cruz v. Shaw, now it's Cruz v. Zucker. And on behalf of all Medicaid-eligible recipients who are diagnosed with gender dysphoria, we created a class action that's been going since June 2014, and we, I would say that all progress that has happened in terms of Medicaid beginning to cover more and more transgender health care is because of this pressure. And every single time that we've been up against either going to trial or up against some other type of deadline in the litigation, the Department of Health has issued new regulations, just like usually at the 11th hour, to try and, I would say, gain a little bit of time.
Well,
Goodness.
so that being said, let's look at the legal perspective here. If we can see that Governor Pataki was politically motivated in denying this coverage and had no mention of transgender folks while these laws and policies are being written, are we just one governor change away from going back to the bad old days, essentially?
Could be. I was, as a physician, I was thrilled to see the news about a month or so ago that the Medicaid rules were being proposed to be changed. I can't tell you how difficult it's been to provide hormonal treatment, let alone surgery, but hormonal treatment and pubertal suppression medications for youth who come to our program for medical care. It's just been a struggle. We were talking outside about the number of times I've been on the phone with Medicaid managed care plans denying treatment, saying that, just threatening them with a civil rights suit and seeing their name in the New York Times. Don't always get anywhere with them, but I'm really glad that the legal advocacy folks that Mick is talking about have been doing this, because it will certainly make our job a lot easier.
Richard, what exactly is going to be covered now, and how important are those treatments?
I mean, primarily it's the hormones. Before they could always get access to seeing us in the hospital, but there was great obstacles to getting the estradiol primarily. So now that that is going to be not a hurdle anymore, it'll be great for our clients, and the anxiety that they might have, would be so much better. So I think it would be really great for them.
So if we're looking at a landscape where every transgender person just has to fight for the recognition from the governor down, especially as it relates to their health care, what about bringing young people into the tent as well? Because it seems like a third rail issue anytime you start talking about kids under 18 and any access that they have to anything in the broader scope of things.
Well, an important development is that just yesterday morning, Judge Rakoff, who's the judge assigned to the Cruz v. Zucker case, issued what's called a bottom line order, which is a very, very short order, basically saying that the plaintiffs, so transgender or Medicaid-eligible folks with gender dysphoria in New York State, have won summary judgment on the fact that any age exclusion of transgender health care violates the Federal Medicaid Act. So we now have a judge's order in addition to the Department of Health's regulation, which is what the announcement was about a month ago. So this means that it's less likely that a change in administration can take it away, because we now know it's unlawful. So we're still waiting on his final order. It'll take him about a month to write it.
This is a good sign.
But it's yes, yeah. So this is like perfect timing, so that we know that it's enshrined in law, and it can't just be taken away because the political winds have moved.
Gotcha. If I could add to that, I mean, the young people in need of transgender health care services, they find us. There aren't many places they can go, and they find us. They get a hold of Richard's cell phone number, my cell phone number. We make ourselves accessible, and if they're not even insured when they contact us, the first thing we do is help them get Medicaid. And we've spent years and years learning how to work our way through the system to advocate for getting people treatment. Sometimes we can get, with Medicaid paying for it, with parental consent, which is another issue entirely, requiring parental consent for this treatment. We can get Medicaid managed care plans to pay for it, and then there will be another Medicaid managed care plan that won't pay for it. There doesn't seem to be any clear set of rules that they operate under. So having a clear mandate from the top makes it clear. But we've managed to figure out ways to make things happen for youth over the years. once the rules change, it throws everything we know out the window, and we have to learn what the new rules are. And sometimes the new rules have some unintended obstacles
Right.
that weren't anticipated that need to get fixed afterwards. But the overall tenor of these rules is to allow access.
Yeah.
And continued access, because we've had clients that we might be able to get them in, and then all of a sudden something will change, and then
It gets
turned off. So, and the anxiety is just
Yeah, that's
so
horrible. Like
Yeah.
you're changing horses mid-race, and then
Right.
all of a sudden things that were anticipated and that were covered are suddenly not, or you don't have access to
Well,
them.
I would take it's worse than horrible. It can be dangerous to stop someone's hormonal therapy
course.
in midstream. There's all sorts of physical changes and mood changes, et cetera, that can result from an interruption in treatment.
So a lot of people who are watching, and anytime we talk about anything transgender, seem to have a very visceral response, where they might not even be informed, but they are going to tell you where their tax dollars should and shouldn't be going to put anyone on this spectrum where they feel like they should be. So can you give us an enlightened perspective from where you are on why this is important for young people?
for our clients.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a huge ruling because now we know exactly how we can provide the services for them, and they know that they'll be receiving services once they come contact us. There'll be none of this what ifs, maybe I won't. I mean, they become very anxious when they find that they may not get what they want, and they know that they really want this at
And I
such a
think-
young age.
Yeah.
I think it's
Right.
important that this is medically necessary health care.
Right.
Right.
So taxpayers might have opinions about that they think that they know what's medically necessary and what's not, and that's fine. We all have opinions about this stuff. But in addition to the Department of Health looking over all of this information, we had experts testify. We had a judge go through all the medical documentation. So we've had multiple individuals spend a lot of time deciding that this is medically necessary health care. And so, you might not like it, but Medicaid has to provide medically necessary health care. That's what it's for. And so it doesn't matter if you don't like it.
And if it's not being provided, young people, older folks as well, will go buy it from
Yes.
illicit sources. We're dealing with a young person right now who said she had done her research and she's going to go out and buy hormones to inject herself. But she really doesn't know what she's injecting herself with, under what circumstances. And besides for hormones, there's silicone injections, et cetera. That there are health risks by not paying it. You're increasing costs in many ways by creating additional health risks.
So what age are we talking about? Is there a sort of median age where it's a point of entry into the medical community to say, this is my issue and I want to address it now?
I mean, we start at the age 13.
13.
Right.
Yeah, people have to find their way to us.
With parental
So
Yeah.
from our perspective, our clinic, we're an adolescent young adult clinic, so our lower age limit is 13. So
And as you said, with parental consent.
Under
so
the
that
age of
has
under
to
the
be
age of
Under the
18.
age of 18.
So anything.
And I think, a lot of what we were doing in this litigation was also a lot of education on this issue. And I think that people sometimes, there's a confusion that you can have medical individuals in a transgender youth's life without anything medical happening to the young person.
Gotcha.
For most of the time, it's actually just like talk therapy or acquiescing the young person and their family to a change in their identity, or maybe not a change. So it's a lot of young people will go through a period of gender dysphoria and then nothing. So a lot of medical intervention doesn't happen until you get to a really particular stage in development, when puberty
The
begins to
secondary puberty stuff.
exactly,
when
which
it
can be
starts.
so traumatizing to a young person and can
Right.
bring on a lot of urges, a lot of like self-harm urges, a lot of suicidal urges. And that was one of the things we brought up in oral arguments last Monday, was that by not providing medically necessary health care to people under 18, we actually increase the risk of school bullying, we increase the risk of suicide, we increase the risk of self-harm to these young people. And we know that there was a way to stop it, and that's by providing medically necessary health care.
Absolutely. Well, it seems like there's a lot of mental health implications, right? Not just the physical ones for not getting this treatment. Richard, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that's the first thing I do is first diagnose them with gender dysphoria and make sure there are no psychiatric illnesses that could interfere with their care. And if they don't receive these services, their depression, their anxiety can grow, and they can make very poor life choices. So,
Do we know at all when these are going into effect? I mean, I know it's all still happening, but
So legally, what we're in is called a notice of proposed rulemaking. So the
45 days. Right?
45 days for the public to comment, and which has been actually, like, I know HEAT and other programs have sort of rallied people in the past when these proposed comment periods are there to share their story, because it really makes a difference. However, now with the judge's ruling, I'm not actually sure. We'll have to see what that interaction is, that maybe the state will have to go into an emergency rulemaking proceeding, or we'll sort of get to see what's going to happen, because what we know for sure is that any age restriction is unlawful, and any restriction that just sort of says we do not provide transgender health care is unlawful. And so how the state's going to respond to that is sort of yet to be seen.
Well, keep us informed.
Yeah.
Thank you. As they do, we'll keep you informed. So thanks for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.